Marseille are the only French club to win the Champions League, so today I'm going to change that. Lyon made the Champions League semi-finals in 2020, losing out to Bayern Munich. Last season they had their joint lowest finish in 27 years and have had an abysmal start to the new season. So I've decided to take it upon myself to rebuild Lyon. The board have set me 3 challenges. Develop the club's youth players, get back into the top 4 of Ligue 1, and win the Champions League. Easy, right? The team itself is okay. The most promising youngsters to develop are left winger Ryan Cherki and centre mid Johan Lepenant. But prominent key players such as Lacazette, Anthony Lopez, Dejan Lovren and Nicolas Tagliafico are the wrong side of 30. However, our lack of depth in the centre of midfield is worrying, so with the £28 million of budget we've got left to spend, we're going to have to focus on that area. For £6 million, I brought in defensive midfielder Renato Tapia from Celta de Vigo, as well as utility man Ferdi Kadioglu for £11 million from Fenerbahce. The new additions mean we are now predicted to finish 4th in the pre-season preview, but we still lost our opening game of the season to Reims. Not ideal. However, we did get that first win in the following game against Rennes. And then we kept winning, including a huge win over PSG, with wonderkid Ryan Cherki getting his first goal of the season, which was followed by a 4-0 thrashing of Marseille, where Cherki scored 2 more. Lacazette was also scoring, but his 4 goals were only good enough for 3rd in our squad. Ahead of him was inverted winger Tino Kadewere, who'd scored 5 goals in 10 games, but Ryan Cherki led the charts with 7, as we had an almost perfect start to the season, sitting a point behind PSG in Ligue 1. Lacazette wasn't particularly happy that he was only our 3rd top scorer of the season, so he decided to do something about it. He scored the only goal of the game against Lens, before getting a hat-trick in a win over Clermont. He also scored braces in wins over Lille and Lorient, meaning that at the start of the winter break, we were still only 2nd in the table, but this time just on goal difference. However, despite the winter break allowing us to rest up for a few weeks, we still couldn't keep pace with PSG. Our form was looking really good, it just wasn't on the level of PSG, who got way ahead of us, but we still had to finish in the top 3 to secure a Champions League spot. Fortunately, we kept picking up wins and ended the season in 2nd place to secure Champions League for next season. We had relied on Lacazette and Cherki for goals this season. With a bunch more games next time out with Champions League football, we need more players scoring goals. However, we also need to improve our back line. Chaletazar was on loan from Southampton, but we do have a £3.1 million optional fee to make the deal permanent, which obviously we triggered. Then we had to replace Dejan Lovren, so I spent a huge £24.5 million on Jorge Suenca. It didn't leave us with a huge amount of budget left, but we had the exact right amount of money to trigger the £17.5 million release fee clause of Yasser Asprilla from Watford to play on the right wing. But then we really had no more money, and I wanted to sign one more player. So we brought in a striker on a free. Welcome home, Anthony Martial. Let go from Manchester United, he rejoins Lyon where he started his career. So with the new look side ready for the season, including academy graduate Kumbedi at right back, I'm feeling pretty good, and for good reason. Martial scored a brace on his 2nd debut for the club in a 2-0 win, before new signing Suenca and Asprilla scored in a 3-0 win in our 2nd game of the season. This continued into an unbeaten September, including a win over Fiorentina in the Champions League, again goals scored by Martial. It's just a shame our next 2 Champions League games were both losses. But after 10 games, we sat on top of the table thanks to PSG's poor start. But there's one thing you need to know about PSG, and it's that they're annoyingly good. Despite our form being excellent up to the winter break, PSG thrashed us 4-0 to go ahead of us in the table. The Champions League though was looking better, and a 2-1 win over Club Brugge was followed by a 0-0 draw with Dortmund. But we ended up 2nd in our group thanks to a 3-0 win over Fiorentina to qualify for the knockout stages. Real Madrid, that's going to be Real fun. Yes, I will see myself out with that, I'm sorry. The first leg hadn't started well, as Tagliafico was sent off just before half-time, allowing Broja to score the only goal of the game for Madrid. We may have lost, but we still have a chance. But that chance ended 6 minutes into the 2nd leg, as Madrid eventually went on to win the game 4-1. In the meantime, we kept winning in the league, with Martial scoring the goals that we needed to keep up with PSG, leaving us 3 points behind with 8 games to go. However, things didn't go well. We drew 1-1 with Nice and then managed to beat Lille 2-1, but then it all went downhill with a 1-0 loss to Lorient, which was followed by 4 draws in a row. Title hopes were completely over, but we did secure a second place finish for a second season in a row. So we have ticked off the board objective of getting back into the top 4. And we do have a star on our hands. Anthony Martial scored 43 goals in all competitions, including 31 in Ligue 1 to take the top scorer award. If we can add some more goals from midfield, we could be on to a winner. But there is going to be a big switch up in season 3. I'm letting Lovren, Lacazette and Lopez all leave the club at the end of their contracts. Luckily, we have 70 million to spend thanks to that Champions League money. We replaced Lopez with Muric from Burnley for his release fee clause of 18.75 million, before replacing Lovren with Anel Ahmedhodzic for £36 million from Sheffield United. I then got the bargain of the century by bringing in Alan Velasco from FC Dallas for just 6.5 million. He was going to sit behind Anthony Martial as I moved to a more attacking formation this season. However, I might have caused some issues. I may have got a little bit excited in the free transfer market, and I brought in quite a few players. Kyle Walker-Peters is going to be great. He can start on either side at fullback, and Ravella is an excellent rotation option in midfield. But we also picked up Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Him and Martial are going to be directly competing this season. It seems stupid to drop Martial given the fact he was the league's top scorer last season, but on paper, Calvert-Lewin is better. As a result, DCL got the nod to start the first 3 games of the season, where he scored a hat-trick on his debut and then scored his 4th goal for the club the following game. In his 3rd and final game before we switched to Martial, he bagged a brace to bring his tally up to 6 goals in 3 games. Switching over to Martial for the next 3 games wasn't quite as good. He did score in a 2-0 win over Lens, but then had to be subbed off after picking up an injury against Auxerre, with DCL coming on to score the winner. The worst thing is that Martial is out for 2 months, meaning it's going to take quite a while for him to get his shot. But now, Calvert-Lewin couldn't score, as we lost 3-0 away to Inter in the Champions League, and he couldn't score against PSG. Luckily, Alan Velasco and Ryan Cherki were on hand to help us to victory, putting us on top of the table. And DCL got back to scoring ways, as he put any hope of an Anthony Martial return to bed, as he dominated both domestically and in Europe. By the winter break, Calvert-Lewin had 22 league goals and 6 in the Champions League. Despite this, PSG was still beating us in the league, as they topped the table by 4 points at Christmas. In the new Champions League format, we finished in 6th place, meaning that we skipped a knockout round. So in the round of 16, we were taking on AC Milan. Thanks to DCL, we drew the away leg 1-1. But it was our very own Ryan Cherki who won us the tie in the second leg. Next up was Manchester United, who we tore apart 3-0 in the first leg with goals from DCL and Alan Velasco, who also scored in the second leg to get us to the semi-finals where PSG awaited. DCL scored the opener before PSG pulled one back. But it was that man Alan Velasco who scored the winner in the first leg. Now all we had to do was hold on for the win in the second leg, which we did not do. I can't even explain this. Luckily we'd been on a good run in the French Cup, and we'd reached our first cup final to take on Marseille, where we lost the game 3-2. These were a very painful couple of days. But we'd been on another level in the league, winning games left, right and centre, and as long as we beat Nantes on the final day of the season, we'd be champions. Velasco opened up the scoring in the 5th minute before Asprilla scored early in the second half to double our lead. And then we sealed the victory via forgotten man Anthony Martial late on to lift our first Ligue 1 title. Calvert-Lewin had been a revelation. 66 goals in all competitions was more than I could have ever hoped for. With Cherki, Asprilla and Velasco behind him, our attack was lethal. What we need to improve though is our midfield and defence. We currently have 3 academy graduates in the starting lineup, which meets the board objectives of developing the club's young talents. But I was losing hope that Elarouche and Kumbidi could be the players that we needed them to be. Plus, Tagliafico is leaving the team at the end of his contract, so we had to bring in a new left back. Focusing on the centre of midfield, Dani Olmo only has 1 year left on his contract at RB Leipzig and is considering his options. As a result, they were happy to get him gone for a cut price deal of $32.5 million. As for a left back, which was the more pressing of the two fullback positions, we had to go for the best available. So we splurged $50 million on Ryan Aït-Nouri from Wolves, a certain upgrade on Tagliafico. But this was now all of our budget gone, so we were going to have to hope that Kumbedi at right back wasn't going to be the weak link that teams would look to exploit. Well, if he was the weak link, it wasn't obvious, as Calvert-Lewin did Calvert-Lewin things as we won our first 5 games of the season, conceding just 1 goal. A couple of losses did creep in, but despite an excellent start to the season, we were surprisingly only in 3rd place. This season might be a little harder than we're expecting, especially as PSG have signed the only person who could compete with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Benjamin Šeško. 17 goals in 10 games. Are you having a laugh? After the Strasbourg loss, we got back to winning ways, with DCL scoring at every opportunity he could. But up next was a huge game against PSG and Benjamin Šeško. However, Calvert-Lewin had to remind him who was in charge as we stormed to a 4-0 victory, with Dominic scoring himself a hat-trick in the process to bring ourselves back on level terms with the Parisians and putting DCL ahead of Šeško, who now somehow, after a blistering start to the season, hadn't scored for 7 games. Meanwhile, in the Champions League, we only came in 10th place. This meant that we had to go through an extra playoff round to progress, and we'd have to beat Monaco to do it. Away from home, DCL scored the only goal of the game to take a narrow advantage back to our place, where Alan Velasco and Ryan Cherki finished off the job. This then gave us Man City in the round of 16. Due to an injury, Martial took over from DCL, and is clearly still a red at heart, as he scored 2 goals on our way to a 3-2 victory. But going to Manchester would be tough. DCL was back from injury and opened up the scoring, but Haaland pulled one back. We then took the lead again in the second half before Man City levelled up the scores on the night. But we held on to our 1-goal advantage and progressed through to the quarter-finals. In the meantime, we kept winning in the league and the title fight was going to go right down to the wire. But we have bigger fish to fry in the Champions League, as we take on Real Madrid, where again, Calvert-Lewin is injured. But luckily, our backup Martial was on form, as he and Velasco picked up braces to win 4-1 at home. In the second leg, Madrid were all over us and scored first, but Velasco scored not long after that. However, just before half-time, Madrid got a second goal to make it 5-3 to Lyon on aggregate. And luckily, we held on. We're going to the Champions League semi-finals again. Chelsea away was going to be a tough battle, and the Blues struck first in the 83rd minute. But we managed to equalise in the last moments of the game. For the second leg, Calvert-Lewin was finally back fit and gave us the lead in the 32nd minute, before Velasco sealed the victory in the second half. We're off to the Champions League final. And with 2 games to go, there's an outside shot of winning Ligue 1. Well, obviously, we bottled it. But not to worry, because we are in the Champions League final, where we're taking on Liverpool, who are experts in the competition. Velasco had an early opportunity, but his shot was blazed over the bar before Luis Diaz missed from close range. In the second half, Ryan Cherki found some space, ran into it and pulled it back to Velasco, who somehow missed. The game was going to extra time. We were given a free kick and Ryan Cherki put it to the far post, where Anel Ahmedhodzic headed it home to give us the lead in the final. Liverpool kept pushing and they came close, but they just couldn't get close enough. Until finally, we done it! We've actually gone on to win the Champions League with Lyon, ticking off the final board request and finally bringing some European glory to France. Winning a Champions League with Lyon is one thing, but trying to win the World Cup with Hungary is even more difficult. With a brand new golden generation, do you reckon the Hungarians could do it? To find out, that video is on screen for you to watch right now.